Namaste and in la catch, and welcome to this week's episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and thank you so much for showing up. I will reiterate once again, Namaste and in la catch are two ancient phrases. Namaste comes from the Sanskrit, written, spoken, it's called Brahmi, and it means the divine in me recognizes the divine in you. In la catch comes from the Mayan culture, other side of the world, and it means I am another you. So imagine if you're holding those two thoughts in your head and greeting everyone from that place. What a difference that can make. Try it and find out. All for now on that. So this week's guest is Char Murphy, also known as Charlotte Esquire. So we have another lawyer on this show. These are wonderful people. You know, we've kind of danced around each other for a while. She's part of the Biz Catalyst 360 author group. She's got her own book called Unshakable Power Through Seasons of the Soul. And I'm sure that's just a divinely inspired book, just having from conversations and interactions with Char to date. She's a founder, author, coach, literary agent, and motivational speaker. She's, as I said before, she's an attorney. And guess what her firm's called? Murphy's Law. I mean, come on, right? So, Char, lovely to have you here. Thanks so much for being.
Thank you. Namaste. I'm pleased to be here.
Me too.
Thank you.
And I hope that introduction was I love what you do. I'll just put it that way. And I'm sure our audience will too, especially after having our conversation. So speaking of, we start out with looking at back in our lives. And I'd like to know, you're a very spiritually developed person as well as being a lawyer. So, and that's rare in itself. When did that first, that inkling that there was an inner world or an interconnection or some kind of spiritual dimension to life that most people don't see that you did? When did that happen?
I would have to say that when I first, I think that I, at a younger age, knew that there was something more than the physical experience I was having, because there had to be something more than the family that I was raised in and having the grandparents. I knew that there was something else. There was just something inside me that knew that there was more. And we barely touched on this, and I don't know how much you want me to go into it, but
as much as you'd like.
I've talked
whatever
about it
you
before.
feel is pertinent.
Well, I do some angel healing, and I work with the angelic realm. Mm-hmm. And the way that came about was a story, was a time right before my first breast cancer diagnosis that I became aware that the angels were actually with me, talking to me, working through me, whether, that I never saw one or really talked to them. I knew that I did angel writing from an early age. I knew that I had heard that term, angel writing, which was basically just channeled writing, right?
Sure.
And
so on a visceral level, what kind of experience was that? Can you describe how that felt and the kind of process that you went through with it? Because I'm sure it was kind of weird initially.
Well, actually, it really wasn't that weird to me. Okay. It was almost, it was very reassuring. Even though I had no idea what was getting ready to happen in my life, I knew that angels were with me at that point when I first, saw a photograph of a huge angel, actually Archangel Ariel, on my front porch after an experience I had with a high school friend. Mm-hmm. And there was actually a photograph taken that showed this angel. And when the medium came to my home because I was like, what is this? Explain this. And then she tells me, well, that's this angel, and that I work with this realm and am able to communicate, call them in by name, and ask for certain assistance in certain areas. So so it felt really reassuring. Obviously, wow, who doesn't want to talk to angels, right?
Right.
I mean,
right. Well, the weird, I didn't mean that it was, all that strange. Weird, it's like people call me weird because of the things that I talk about, right? And if it's just not normal in the kinds of experiences that we're used to from a normal human standpoint, right? We just don't have these kinds. That doesn't mean they're not available to everybody, because they are, right? And I think we can validate that because just from our own experience. And yet there's that chasm in between of the willingness to step into it, even though it's present, because it is kind of strange, weird, different. And especially if we begin to talk to others about it, that also sets up another series of challenges in trying to articulate things so that we don't sound like we're crazy, right?
Yes, exactly. Even me publicly talking about the experience and how it happened and what happened and how this angel appeared and how the angels actually appear now and how I work with them in different areas. And it can be an odd experience for
Sure.
people to hear and go, oh, really? You think you're an angel? Or do you? No, I know I am. We probably
and to
all are.
speak that with confidence. Now, and being a lawyer too, that would seem to at least give you a foundation of credibility from which to begin speaking about these things, because it's not like you're just come out of nowhere and spouting these esoteric experiences. You actually had a really solid down to earth. I mean, I don't know of anybody. Lawyers are one of the most, and I'm not necessarily of the belief system that Shakespeare said, right? However, you guys are what make the world turn in the best ways possible. Not always successfully, but there is that process through law that we have the life that we do, right? And
True.
so now how can we accelerate that, accentuate it? And now you're incorporating, it seems from what you're saying, this deeper level of understanding. I've even called it the perfected form, fit, and function in the world that we're designed to have, and the various levels of that, because it can span quite a number of dimensions once we begin to look and ask questions, right? So speaking of looking and asking questions, what kinds of questions were you asking to more fully understand and integrate with this ability that you have, or life that you are?
So the question would be, what kinds of questions was I asking? Like, why did this happen? Why was this happening to me?
Right, because
Or how could I use this?
For me, it was like, okay, why me? Well, first thing was, why not? But there are other things, because as you ask the questions about it, it seems to become clearer and more available and even more understandable in the application of it. And so that vulnerability that becomes present is more comfortable.
Right. So right after that, the first angel encounter that I knew to be actually what it is, and I was diagnosed 3 days later with the first breast cancer diagnosis that I had. And so I was told that they were there to guide me and lead me, that I would be okay, but that it wasn't over after the first time. They also told me that they were forming, that during each surgery, each procedure, every single step that I would have to take, that they were with me, that they were actually forming this canopy above me and had me surrounded with protection and the white light. And so it was like, wow, this is really fantastic. No, it's not over. That's okay. Well, but I didn't go into fear. I never went into fear after that.
Right.
Even after the 4 diagnosis and the eventual everything that happened afterwards, I never was in fear. I knew that I was being guided and that I was a part of something greater than myself, and that the reason that everything was unfolding exactly the way it did, with them literally showing themselves to me right before the first diagnosis, was to reassure me that this next part of my journey, which was the end of the successful huge law practice thing, that I had there was the greater plan for my life. There was a greater purpose, and that was leading me into being able to help other people through their struggles and their problems. Even though I was already doing that as a lawyer,
Sure.
this was taking it to a whole nother level now.
I was going to ask
right?
you, so it took your skill set to a whole new level, didn't necessarily change it all that much. What it did was it seemed to accentuate and raise the bar.
Right.
Right.
I actually, raised the bar.
Yeah.
Raised the bar. Yes. And so that I knew that I all of a sudden knew that I had more gifts than I thought previously that I had. We grow and then learn when we're shown these things, we experience these things, and then this whole other realm opens up, right? That takes us to where we agreed to come and do and
Right.
be.
And it's through our direct experience and choice, right? And
yes.
so it's undeniable. Whether
Right.
we can't say, well, we imagined this. Well, so it was still our experience, right? And we cannot deny what our individual experiences are, no matter how bizarre they may be.
Well, when there's a huge angel picture with the glow on the concrete that takes up your whole wraparound front porch, and that picture is, taken with a disposable camera back in the early 2000s, that type of thing just doesn't show. When that showed itself, when I saw that, there was no denying that, as
Right.
you say.
Yeah.
There's no, there was no,
that was a film blemish or whatever. And like, yeah, right.
oh,
You can word it, you can explain everything away, but the simplest explanation is usually the truth, right? And here's the picture.
well, right. And I'm sure a lot of people would have just said, oh, that's photoshopped or whatever. But I don't even know if they could do Photoshop back then. Well, maybe they could, but perhaps. It was obvious to me because just the being itself, you could feel that. I mean, we were just like, the energy was like huge and surrounding, and within there was no denying it. It was real, and
that was your direct experience. The film reference was simply a validation of it, because again, it was your direct experience prior to that you knew something was going on there, and you had a pretty clear view of what it was from what
right, exactly
said, right? So that's right. How, oh gosh, in the movement through that, what were the next things that began to happen that guided you, Grant? And I love how you brought to the point to bear that it was not just the faith, the trust that you were in helping hands, so to speak.
Mhm.
And whatever trials and tribulations you were about to face, there was support for you to get through them effectively, and that you were going to be okay.
Yes, exactly. I knew that was just a knowing, it's just that knowing. And there was a faith. It's a faith is, to me, being able to believe in something, obviously, that we can't see. But when we actually see it and then it's explained to us, it sort of was like a ding, ding, ding. It was like, there's no denying this. This is
Right.
real. This is happening. And it went from faith, trust, to faith. Yes, just knowing that I was going to be okay. I was going to come through it, all of it.
It actually transforms into the knowing. And so one of the questions that folks often have, and me too, because we don't often pay attention to our bodies. These kinds of things have locations in our bodies, in my opinion, and from what I've researched, that there are sensations we have along with that. Did you have those, or have you thought about that? Because sometimes we don't even think about it, right? It's just something that we're aware of and we develop a knowing. Is there, or were there sensations that accompanied that help to anchor that trust, or to expose more of it?
If you're asking for a specific location in my body,
Yeah,
where
was
I
there a
felt it,
visceral sensation that came along with that? Because when people experience these kinds of things, and I know there's thousands of them doing so, we don't necessarily know how to relate to it, or that our bodies are transceivers and they're communicating with us, and we just, they're an instrument. We just haven't learned how to tune it, let alone read the music.
Mhm. It was actually a heart opening. It was heart. It was a heart opening, and which is interesting now that you're asking me this question, because I really haven't thought about it that much, but it's obvious. And then the cancers 4 times were always on the left side. So
what did that
the
mean to
heart.
you?
Well, as you just asked me what part of the body, and so it was having to do with, there was some kind of a heart connection to that dis-ease that was showing up on the left side of my body, which, as you know, is the maternal side of the body. And you also know that I had a very traumatic upbringing and a lot of difficulty with my mother. So that was the source of, one of the sources of the disease was in my heart. My heart was broken. So when you say, where did it show up? Where did I feel it? I felt it I felt it in my heart. And then when you start putting all that together with the left side of the body and the disease being over there, it's sort of like, wow, I'm going to have to think about this some more, Zen.
See, now, and this is why I call it apocalyptic chats, because we reveal things oftentimes we hadn't thought about, and just by merely asking the questions, and some of them seem obvious, right? Some of them not so. Yet they take us deeper into our own awareness and the ability to check in, which
Exactly.
we draw out that education, right? We've got all the answers within.
Yes.
Our body has everything. We just need to learn how to ask the right questions to bring that knowledge forward
at the right time. Right. I agree.
in this process. Then now, and as you're going to become aware, or even more so of this as you dig deeper now, do you find that there are others around you that are going through similar things? And this question is kind of twofold. What have you noticed is the most opportunistic capacity that you have for assistance? And what are the types of things that your, for lack of better, clients are going through?
Most of them have been somehow disempowered through life experiences, and they're searching for themselves, that they're looking to know who they really are. And so I help them by putting them in touch with their true essence of who they really are, which we all are. Love. We are, first of all, love. And a lot of people don't know how to love themselves, and they don't know that loving ourselves is not a selfish thing. It's something that we have to be able to do before we can love others.
Right.
If we don't love ourselves, yes.
And we're conditioned by the outer world to be self-deprecating, because we're taught that we're less than, that we need to do this or that, or wear this or wear that, think this, think that, be this or that. And the reality is, it's that center of our own being that we've lost touch with that has all of that. And
that's exactly right.
So so in this doing so, and thank you for answering it, that was a good demonstration of the kinds of things people go through. And it is usually that insecurity that comes up of being able to be fully present and being who they are. So how were you able, or are you able to help those? What are the kinds of things, even on a basic level, that you've found to be most influential in helping them to transform their perception or perception?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. You know, we all are conditioned from the moment we are, the moment we take this physical form, we're conditioned to believe or know certain things that other people are wanting from us, or withholding from us, whether that be, in my case, I was the fat baby when I was born. So my mother did not think that I belonged to her. She couldn't believe that she would have a fat baby. And she even told the nurse that brought me for the first time, that's not my baby. That's not my baby. So I was on a diet from the day I was born, because I did not fit that picture of how she pictured me to look.
Well, that's so unfortunate, and yet so telling of how well programmed your mother was.
Right? But, and this is the beauty of it, and this is the way that I have learned to look at it. I teach to look for the gift in everything. Okay.
There's a silver lining everywhere.
That's right. I have a little angel thing over there that says there's beauty everywhere. You just have to find it.
Right.
You just have to look for it. So that experience, which was, it's just odd. It's very odd, but that continued. And I told you about the left-handedness and being taught there was something wrong with me. Right. There was something wrong with me.
Yeah.
There was something wrong with me. I was different than all the other kids. I was left-handed. They tried to make me be right-handed. I couldn't be right-handed. So I felt less than, not good enough. My mother rejected me from birth, and not only did she withhold food, but she withheld her love. And so it took me a long time. And it may have even been that moment when I had that first angel experience with them actually showing themselves to me, when I realized, wow. And this is even through my law practice where I was very successful and all that, but that's like, okay, well, so what? Right? That's not who I really am. What we do is not who we are. And we're conditioned to be these
We can
things.
example who we are through what we do, right?
True.
As a lawyer, you can hold the highest standard for yourself and others, and not all lawyers do that. However, because of that understanding that you already had, it would seem that that's kind of automatic. You know, it's part of, I can't live with myself if I'm not that way. Right.
Right. So it's as a lawyer, I am an empath. But so as a lawyer, I'm being a good lawyer is more than just going to court and helping people with their problems, solve their problems, whatever kind of conflict they're involved in. That's when lawyers usually come into play, right? There's a conflict.
Right.
But also, I was voted best lawyer in Central Arkansas because people trusted me I was the lawyer that cared. I was the lawyer that cared because I was empathetic. I was compassionate.
You put the old adage of Murphy's Law, and whatever can go wrong will, and whatever can go right does with you. That's a great flip, right? In relating to your birth and upbringing and things, I can partially relate to that because I was orphaned at birth and been adopted at 6 weeks. And so I experienced the love, honor, adoration, that you would anticipate a child getting in spades. I mean, it was unquestionable that I was cared for and loved by this couple. And yet, when I found out I was adopted, it's like, oh, so who are my real parents? Do I have a father and mother in heaven? Because I'd been going to Sunday school already. And can I talk to them? And so that's how my inner voice began to develop, because I was actually reaching out and saying, hey, can I talk to you guys? And they actually responded. And for 5-year-old, that's pretty weird. Maybe not uncommon. And yet for an individual that age to be having that kind of an experience, as a 5-year-old, I never thought about it not being real. Right? Because it began then and then continued throughout the rest of my life. Yet early on, it was like when I first heard the voice within, I thought it was loud enough that my mother should have heard it. And then I asked her so. And she goes, no, I didn't hear any voice. It must have been a peeping Tom, right? So I had to deal with that kind of, and it wasn't outright rejection. I just realized that, oh, that's something private for me. It doesn't deny it, in any way. It just made it more understandable that it was inside of me rather than available outside, at least at that point.
Right. And so you knew from an early age that there are voices we have an inner voice that we actually need to, or I don't like to use the word need, but that is accessible for us to draw from. And yes,
even in scripture, not that I'm a scripturalist, however, many people are. And even in those texts, it says the still small voice, right? It's not loud. Sometimes it can be, right? Yet it's this subtle, sublime, sometimes often surreal kind of experience that makes life, that expands life, right? It doesn't
Yes.
restrict it in any way. So in this expansion for you, how have you been able to take that and imbue the others around you with a sense of, hey, there really is more to life?
Right. And it starts with letting them know exactly what we were just talking about, that there you do have this higher self, and it communicates with your soul, and you have this inner voice that is powerful. And it can, when you ask, do you ask outside of yourself, or do you ask the question of your inner voice, your higher self? Which, and I believe that you were actually asking your higher mind, is this voice real?
Mm-hmm. Right, because initially you don't know. You know, is this me thinking? Is this me imagining? Is this me having a conversation with myself? And then the kinds of, what I found anyway, the kinds of conversations that you have with yourself, you don't have the intelligence or knowledge to do so in some cases, right? Because these new
Exactly.
concepts and ideas are introduced, and it's like, wait a minute, how could I have thought about that? I've never considered that in my life. And yet, here it is. So those kinds of moments
Right.
they can be pretty intense and yet very revelatory in nature,
Right.
because it does take us to a new level of experience.
Right. So I help people understand that the answers are already inside them, and that it is in that asking of their higher self, or our higher self, that is where the answers come from, because they are already in our knowing. We just haven't brought them to the surface in order to help us through whatever it may be that we're going through, to get to that next level of awareness, or next phase of life, or whatever you want to call it. We haven't explored what's really in here,
Right.
and what it's really trying to tell us. And that's where, when people say, well, I don't know what my purpose is, and, well, have you, like you say, have you asked? Have you asked yourself?
And in doing so, do you try to answer it with what you think you know already, or do you put it on pause and just be open to listening and experiencing and think, Renee Marie Rilke had a great passage about asking questions, and that you ask questions, you cannot expect to answer them with what you think you know, otherwise you wouldn't have the questions, first of all. And yet, by doing so, by asking the questions and then just living your life, those
Mm-hmm.
answers will roll out over time and surface when you least expect them.
Exactly. That was very brilliantly put. And
What me? That was Rilke, right? I just
yeah,
paraphrased. It's true, though.
right. And we have to listen. So if we ask, then we have to listen, right? We
Right?
have to learn to listen to ourselves. And
And
I've
like a
been
good
big on
lawyer, we
this
can
lately.
still argue, right?
We can argue with ourselves, and yes, we can. We
And
can.
in
But
some
that's
cases, it's best when we do, because it clarifies that information, because we want to know the truth, and we have to
right.
back away at it. So whatever we are missing, that's where that argument comes in order to have the clarification. It's not necessarily that we're arguing because we don't believe, right? That's one side of it. The other side is we're arguing because we want to understand further.
Right. Yes. And it's because if we don't take the time to listen and try to understand, we can argue. If we argue, it's because we might be going into fear about it, or just that not understanding, like you say. But there's that fear of the unknown. Well, how can I know that I trust that voice? How do I know that I can trust that voice? Well, it's practice, right?
Yes.
You don't, right. It comes with practice and listening and doing and following that inner guidance and that inner voice. And then the more that we do that, the more that we learn to do that.
You don't know how to ride a bike at your first try.
That's exactly right. Right. So we practice it, and it's a lifetime practice. And the better we get at listening, and arguing only prolongs the inevitable. I mean, we can make decisions against our own.
Absolutely. We have free will.
Exactly. And some people do that and may work for them.
Temporarily.
That's temporarily until something just hits them square between the eyes and knocks them back like it did me, because I knew that my stress levels were out the roof, and that I was, way in. I was the only lawyer in my firm with 10 employees and $40,000 a month overhead.
Wow.
Back in the mid 90s and early 2000s. How much money is that today per month? And I was the only lawyer. So there's a
you must have a real decent rate then.
No, actually, I help the little guys. I'm not an hour. I don't charge I never charged by the hour in my life. I didn't work that way. So
hence your willingness to spend the kinds of hours and weeks and months necessary to do what you felt was best.
Right.
Yeah, you just couldn't do it any other way.
Right.
It's unfortunate that things happen, yet it moved you to the next level, and you kind of knew that was happening. Now, speaking of next levels, we're in the midst of a next level population-wise right now, coming out of COVID. And when it first began, there was this sense for me that, okay, here's an opportunity. And I told my wife, I said, Luba, I really hope that the obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration will get people to turn inward, because they got no place else to go, right? They're just now. Do you see that kind of activity having happened in how you see what's unfolding? I don't know if we're post-COVID yet or not, but let's say we are in post-COVID times, right? Just for the sake of argument, we're post-COVID, right? Do you see those kinds of things, the internal, the turning inward and what that does? Do you see that evidence in your interactions with people now? Is there a different layer or a different place that they come from?
That is a good question. It may be premature to answer that because I don't know.
I agree. It's still preliminary.
And I don't know. I don't know what the research is going to show on the long-term effects of this. But for me, I can speak for myself and say that for me, I definitely was. I went inward more than I ever had before, and was able to write 3 books during that time. And, but because of my medical history, I was alone for over a year
Mm-hmm.
with only the person that was delivering groceries to my condo on the beach. I'm living my dream on the beach, and then COVID comes. And
And
so,
not being
but
able to experience it.
no, right? So what?
Talk
No,
about a
it,
carrot. I mean, here it is. Come on, get it. No, you can't have it.
but the gift,
Good.
yeah, right. But the
Good.
gift in it was I had this beautiful balcony that actually overlooked the water, and I had the time and to live in another one of my dreams was to become a published author.
Mm-hmm.
So during that time I'm writing and I'm publishing, and I write three books, and I have this beautiful balcony overlooking the water. Well, I can't really go anywhere and do anything, but hey, this must be why I'm here.
Yeah.
And at least they
Well, you
put
can
me in
hang
a
out and
great
make paper airplane flyers, right? It's just
at least they put me in a great place,
yeah.
that I
Yeah.
could at least enjoy it from a high up viewpoint, and then also to become that published author. So actually, I don't. But as far as other people, I'm sure that it either took them to deeper levels, or they're crazy now. And at one point, I even questioned my own sanity a little bit. It was sort of like, wow, what kind of damage does that aloneness for that long without any really human contact at all? How does that really affect us?
I mean, thinking about it, I'm getting all choked up. Excuse me. So, and the great question is, how does it affect us? What are the levels? Excuse me. How deep and how broad does that happen throughout the global population? Because it
Right.
seemed to me that through the narrative, we were actually being programmed or asked even to be wary of each other, right? Far more.
Exactly.
So here's this global, I'm afraid of you because you might have this, and I'm going to, have my 6 feet, if not more, because of that. And that effect alone on the human psyche is huge. Now that we've distanced ourselves, how do we come back together more effectively? And how do we affect change that will either diminish, mitigate, or dissolve this notion of needing to be afraid of each other? Because as you said before, we're all just love. There's 2 things I believe we seek in life: to love and be loved.
That's right.
So why are we so resistant to that? And why can't we show up in those places, like the namaste and the Inlakesh? What's in the way, do you think?
Right now, you just ask the $1 million question is how do we go forward from here,
Mm-hmm.
without even really knowing the depth of the damage, if you will, to individuals, really on a real level. I mean, it has to have a mental effect. I know that there's a lot of crises in the world right now.
I think it's
And
more of an emotional effect than a mental one.
exactly, emotional. And we're seeing high levels of addiction and suicide, and how do we come back together? How does that look? And especially,
The fact that we have the opportunity to do so is huge,
well,
and
in my theory,
maybe going unrecognized today.
right. And in my theory is, as I always look for the good in everything, that really, if you want to talk about why we're here at this particular time, why we chose to come here at this particular time, and why this pandemic occurred while we're here, is to figure out, really, or to be led and guided and listen to our inner voice and to our higher mind. Why are we here at this time?
Yeah.
We are here to bring people back together, even at maybe a more connected level in the physical sense than we ever have been.
Well, we've got it through the internet now. There was a time where it didn't get everywhere, and now it's pretty much everywhere. So there's this global brain that's in place that we have access to. It's an electronic system. Well, we're electronic too. So now, and I don't know if you've noticed this, I have, my wife has, we have this game with the electronic fields of, what's going to sound or what's going to go off, and when we say something, to accentuate or to give it punctuation, right? And because it does. And yet, of course, we could also be imagining the synchronicities, and yet they happen too often to just be coincidence, right? So in this expansion and the silver lining that we were talking about earlier, that gives it a very opportunistic flavor for those of us or those like us that have this idea that, it's time we learned how to get along together, because we've got the systems in place to take care of everybody. They're just not being well managed. And so we can shift that. There's no shortage, there's no scarcity, there's no lack of anything. Even though we're being told that. You look around, and if you travel or around the world, we're really not lacking anything. What we're lacking is the intelligence to manage it better. And I think that may be part of the shift that's taking place. Like we were talking earlier, having just accepted this co-executive director role with the Live and Let Live Foundation. This is a global peace movement now that actually has some teeth in it, because it's looking at how can we make the legal principle of live and let live, which is non-aggression, how can we make that ubiquitous, and what do we need to do? How can we affect those and invite those who are capable, like the lawyers and the legislators and things like that? We're not necessarily getting political, because it's not a political thing. This just makes sense, right? And so when you make sense, it takes it out of the realm of any kind of compartmentalization, because that making sense is ubiquitous. It just feels right. And that's a sensation that cannot be denied. So here we have this opportunity to bring a new flavor of going into the existing systems and using their rules to help redesign them to fit more of what we need.
Exactly.
And this may be a 10, 15-year process. However, if we don't start, it'll never get done. And, it's like, in that product curve where we're just starting out and, we're trying to get the traction. Well, we have 30 plus chapters in 19 countries so far. So we're a little ahead of the game. And yet, we aren't as popular, we're not further up on the product curve to where we're, best thing since sliced bread yet, although we may be. And the fact that we're using the collaborative alliance notion of creating the alliances with other organizations and businesses and leaders and things like that to move this forward, it gives us the opportunity to work collectively as one, which is kind of how we're designed, with the whole, and I think we talked about this earlier, that, or at least brushed on it, the idea of oneness, and that we have to give up our individuality to be part of it, right? That's kind of the thinking of the process. Well, that could be further from the truth. In reality, it doesn't change who you are or what you're doing necessarily. However, it does change how you do things, which is the most important part. You step up in a more mindful, vulnerable way so that you're accessible to that which is within you that's screaming like heck to try and get out, right? Because I think that's really what's happening right now. And are those, in saying that, I got two eyes, so I got, or one perspective. Actually, I don't, but for lack of, or for the argument's sake here, do you see that perspective shifting for others? Do you notice things around you in your community, in what you're hearing around you, not necessarily what you're personally engaged in, but just in your observation of things? Do you see the potential of that happening, or indicators that it could?
Absolutely. I actually have been observing it over, maybe in the last 6 months, actually. Interestingly enough, when, during the time where we are starting to come back together, and even if we meet electronically, we are part of that energetic system and that one connection that we all are part of. So many are realizing this and starting to, it's like we're seeing each other, like I'm seeing you, you're seeing me, and then it's this namaste and I am you, you are me type of thinking or knowing that's starting to be seen and felt and heard. People are starting to get that. And
well, it's only millennia. We've been, I mean, this whole philosophy is thousands of years old.
Right. So here we are now at the time where and like you said, it may take 15 or who knows how long, but we are here for this reason. This is what I believe anyway, is that we are here for the very reason you're asking me right now, is to help raise the consciousness of the planet, where we're in this field and this vibration is spreading and people are starting to understand, they're starting to figure it out. And as we raise ours, we raise theirs, they raise others. And it's this beautiful, like, expansion effect that is bringing it all back together again.
It's kind of like a third-party cell too, right? Where people can listen to conversations like we're having, and they don't necessarily have to reveal what's going on inside them. They can say, oh, by the way, I heard these two talking about this, and what do you think? Right? Right? So it gives people the opportunity to use us as kind of a third-party neutral, if you will, and to help facilitate conversations, which is really our intention in doing this. We're having a wonderful conversation here that is so intimately connected with ourselves, and sharing from that place, because we've both lived there for a long time and we're old enough to know, right? And young enough not to care anymore. That it's this golden opportunity for this transformation to take place. And there are many, I mean, we're not the only ones. There are many like us who are doing similar things. And this is what I find so exciting, is because of my social reach, I guess, and across the internet, I pay attention to a lot of things like you. And I'm watching all of this and I'm seeing this shift. And like I say, in the last 6 months, it's been huge. There's like this, okay, some door opened up and people are starting to pop out and play together again, and play together in new ways.
Exactly. That's right. I definitely think it's happening, and I'm super excited about it, because, and I truly believe that not only this is the reason why we're here right now, even on this conversation, going out into the airways, so that people go, I mean, they might not believe it, but they can at least go, right? Like the angel that showed up and on the front porch, and I at least had to stop and go, right. So those seeds are just being planted, and
All
it's
right.
up to,
And they ripple through the thought. I like to call it, I can't take credit for this phrase. I heard it from a mentor of mine, Kyle Wynn, the thoughtmosphere, right? And he might have gotten it
right.
from Werner Erhard. He worked with him for a number of years. But when we talk, the conversation, because two or more are gathered, it ripples through the thoughtmosphere. Now, does that mean everybody picks it up right away? No. What it
Right.
does mean, though, is it's in the repository for that to happen. And as we
Exactly.
understand that everything's connected, we're scientifically, we're 99% space, right? That's an axiom now, right? So if we're 99% space, what's in that space? Because we think we're the physical beings, we do the physical things, yet there's so much more available. And how does this consciousness that permeates this space work? Right? We haven't been asking those kinds of questions yet. Biomimicry has begun to come up as a result of looking at nature and seeing how eloquently nature performs. So, the more we pay, and this to me is nature emerging from within us. This is our natural design. This is what we were intended to do, do, and to have as a planetary civilization. And in order for us to be available to be part of any advanced galactic civilization, right? Because we know we're being visited. For us to be part of that, we first have to learn to get along with each other and have a unified field here. Now, whether we're able to live fully in quantum entanglement in that unified field or not is still the question. However, that statement of living in the unified field, or living in quantum entanglement in the unified field, was said a little more simply just by living in spirit. Right? It's the same thing. So now we have the science side, which counters the faith-based side with the reality that, oh yeah, this does exist. So you can move that direction at least a little bit in your considerations of how you live.
Even if you just start with yourself.
Well, you have to start with yourself.
Right.
You cannot be available to somebody else unless you do.
Right. In your own home, with your own family, with your own, the people around you. And then.
So how would you see that happening? What are the kinds of things that people can do, or ways they can interact, or ways they may change prior behavior, those kinds of things? What are the practical and pragmatic things that people can do for or with themselves and their immediate environment?
I think that we have to learn not only to love ourselves, but that includes value, and truly value what others have to offer, and understand that they even in their imperfectness, or our imperfectness in these human physical bodies we've taken on as spiritual beings, we are not perfect, and we can't, because we have to recognize that, okay, I know I'm not perfect, and so I have to know that you're not perfect either. But how can we just know that about each other and let that be okay, and still be able to work together to work through some of these problems that we have without killing each other?
First thing, one of the things that, and Mark Victor, one of the co-founders of Live and Let Live, he says that I'm just trying to be the best human being I can be. If I make a mistake, which I will, I'll own it. I'm not going to put it off on somebody else.
Yeah.
And that by doing so, then that also, that would be one thing. Then the second thing is to provide, and you've said it in other terms, being able to provide a psychologically safe and intellectually humble environment, which
Yes.
means that you're not going to be attacked for what you believe or how you feel, and that you're willing to listen to another's point of view fully without argument, and attempt to understand them first. Being a lawyer, you're familiar with the Association for Alternate Dispute Resolution, right?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
One of my mentors was the president for a short time, and I'm not sure how long ago. His name's Jerome Landau, and he's also black belt in Aikido, and he's done workshops at the UN on peace building and things like that. But he says, there really is no conflict. What there is miscommunication. We arrive at the table, whether it's 2 or 3 or a half dozen or whatever, we all got different dictionaries from which we're listening.
Yes.
And speaking from. Most important thing, we're listening from those. So we first, in order to get all the miscommunication out of the way, we've got to understand each other first. And that's going to have nothing to do with the seeming conflict, right? Because that conflict, the perceived conflict, may disappear once you understand each other, and most usually does. Right.
But at the same time, we have to start talking first.
Absolutely.
We have to start talking first. There's going to be things that we differ maybe in, of course. I mean, everybody's got differing ideas and things that we've already said this, and that they might not agree with us, but why does that make them wrong and us right?
Yeah, it doesn't. It's just 2 points of view.
Right.
And
that's
you could
right.
be looking at the same thing and just seeing it a bit differently.
That's
the
right.
trick is to recognize that and then figure out, okay, now what is the same for us in this? And how can we find a common place from which we can begin to resolve whatever might have been that miscommunication or the challenge that we were facing. Now, in some cases, it comes to the aggression, right? I don't want you to aggress on me anymore. And that's what's been happening. And so there's a conflict that comes from that. However, it appears anyway, that when you have that conversation about feeling like because some people don't realize they're aggressing, right? It's just their nature. It's how they are. And until somebody says, hey, wait a minute, right? Like you did with your brother, right? So they say, wait a minute, I don't eat that food. Why are you ordering that for me, right?
Right.
So there's, again, the lack of understanding of your dietary needs created a conflict.
It was a lack of communication.
Right.
Totally.
So in this, I love what you say, you got to talk. We have to talk to each other. Now, do we want to say frivolous things or have cursory conversations? No, I think that's last century, maybe even several centuries prior. Now we're in a place where, we all know about this age of enlightenment or golden age or new world order or however you want to call it, that's evolving because of how we have learned more about ourselves and the world around us. And as this increases, we're going to get closer and closer, and we're going to know how. Right. And yet it starts with the talking. So what kind of conversations do you initiate?
Me?
Yeah. Yeah, you're the you. I'm not talking about the general you at this point. This is the specific you. Right? What kind of conversations do you initiate to help that along? What are the things that you use? And I'm saying that I'm asking this to give others kind of an idea too, and maybe for you to think about what more you could do. But what do you do currently?
I think what do I do currently is I ask people. I like to ask and find out what's important to you. What do you place a value on? What are you, what role do you see yourself playing in this bigger uh, enlightening or raising of the consciousness up, if you believe in that? What part do you see yourself playing? Are you willing to talk? Are you willing to be vulnerable? Are you willing to listen? Are you willing to try to understand? Are you with me or are you against me? Are you?
Ooh, that's a tough one, right? Are you with me or against me? So that almost, what it brings up for me is the need for reframing,
You're
right?
right.
So that it's
Right.
more of a positive kind of,
Right.
I understand why you said that,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's in like the literal sense. Are we going to try to get along? Are we going to try to understand each other? Are we going to, or are we just going to say, look, close the book, it's done, and walk our separate ways? I mean, sometimes people, sometimes people do that.
That's the
And
live and
that's,
let live. As long as they don't affect us, it's their choice, and we need to
mhm,
acknowledge and honor that, love them just the same,
right.
right? We may not interact with them as much, and
Hmm.
that's okay too. That's our choice.
Hmm.
And it's happens naturally because there's two different frequencies that are apparently incompatible, at least in that moment. That doesn't mean that they
Right.
won't return.
Right. And it doesn't make one right or wrong.
Correct. It's just what is for each of it. It makes them true to themselves in that moment.
Exactly. And it's a personal thing. I may not even have a right to, some people even would think that that's an invasion of their space to ask those questions. They're,
And that's true. So often when we ask questions of others, it's like an affront. It's like we're attacking, or the response reaction is
mhm,
often like, we feel like we're being attacked, because,
mhm,
and it's like, wait a minute, I'm just asking a question here.
mhm.
And yet that would be an indicator that, oh, you've touched on something really sensitive that either they haven't thought about or are in a place that they're so embarrassed about that they're
Mhm.
not going to answer, and they're going to, it's a fight or flight thing. Right? No,
Right,
I can't
right.
deal with that right now, so I'm going to do something that
Mhm,
disconnects us.
mhm. Exactly. Exactly. And that's a choice,
Mhm.
right? Everything's a choice. How bad you want it, or do
How
you
good
want
do you
it?
want it?
Yeah, exactly. How do you want it? Or how good, or yeah, how good do you want it to be?
Yeah.
And we have that. I believe we have the ability. It's just now I think we are actually stepping into the bigger realms, like the things that you're talking about, with the lawyers, and there's just, and I think the system is, you're right. I don't like to talk about it because it kind of puts, it may be one of my triggers. I don't
Well,
know.
I think it's a trigger
Uh,
for all of us because, number one, we don't understand it, and we think that somebody's in control of it, or a group isn't, and they may be. Um, However, it's because of our lack of engagement and understanding of it that we're in the situation we are. Most of
mhm.
us want to trust the leadership that says, yeah, we'll take care of you, because we want to hear the words, take them in as being truth, and believe that.
Sure.
So the
Sure.
last 50, 60, let's say even 70 years has proven that's not the best thing to think,
Yeah.
because it's
Mhm.
proven wrong, right?
Right.
We're no longer being nurtured by our government, right?
Right.
We're being controlled by corporations, right?
Hmm.
And it's the profit over people and planet agenda as opposed to the people and planet over profit. Doesn't eliminate the profit because we still need to live and grow. What it does is it changes the how, right? And who it serves. So those are the kinds of things that I believe are happening, and you do too. So in that further progression, what kind of advice can you give for everyday activity that people have now? Is there something that that you could offer, or something that you do offer to others currently, of little, tasty tidbits for the moment that they can carry with them
To do
affect
what?
their own growth, or to affect their own ability to become more aware and observant, or any of those kinds of things? Ultimately, we want people just to love and be loved and be happy, right?
Right.
To be safe and secure and fed and clothed and housed and cared for, right?
Right.
So in the conversations you're having with those who are being challenged, what kind of tasty tidbits, again, do you give them to help them along the way?
Well, I do encourage them to listen to that inner voice and to go within themselves, whether that be, there's all different kinds of ways that we can do that, whether that's meditation and going into that still, quiet place and really listening. And I find myself almost in a constant meditation where I just walk around in meditation all the time.
Well, that, Nick Thot Han calls that, or Thich Nhat Hanh calls that interbeingness.
Right. So the things that I say are just to get in touch with who you are, learn to accept that person who you are, find the gift in everything, even if it's the worst thing you think has ever happened in your life. Look to see why did that happen? Why did it happen? What did I learn from that experience? And how can I use that going forward to help someone else? Because that's usually the reason why things happen to us, is because there's something there that we're supposed to learn. We're supposed to listen. We're supposed to get in touch with that, whatever that is, and however that looks in your particular situation. You're probably, the people probably looking at me right now going, oh yeah, that's easy for you to say. Well, it's not that easy when you have had breast cancer 4 times and you grew up in an abusive, like I have not had a perfect life, but I've learned to find the good in the things that did happen and have happened to lead me to the next best place in my life. And it's not a big jump. These are baby steps that we have to take.
And they all are. They're baby steps. They're
That's right.
1 foot in front of the other, Bob.
That's right.
Baby
That's
steps,
right.
Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this has been just an amazing, wonderful conversation, Char, and I'm so appreciative that we were able to have it, and that you've been able to share your wisdom, which is deep and profound.
Thank you.
And will make a difference in others' lives. And I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Bye-bye.
And namaste and in la catch. Thank you all for tuning in and watching this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host. And as always, I will see you next time.